So in the previous series, I've ended with the review of Clover devices against Pax devices. And we've ended with just saying that processing from Clover is only done with Fiserv, First Data Company, whereas Pax is completely open to any processor. Now, today I'm going to continue on this conversation. And the first thing that I want to sort of point out is that a complete solution, a complete point of sale solution from the perspective of a customer or a merchant has three components in it. It would be the software, hardware, and the payments, right? And I'm going to go into this next slide here and show you an example. So here we have a merchant A, right? And merchant A has a Clover device. So the device itself, that's your hardware component, right? So that's your hardware. And you can see that Clover provides hardware. This part right here, in this little hand that conducts the payment, that's the payment component, right? So this part right here, this device, which is part of this complete ensemble here, takes payments. And so that would be this part. And you can see that Clover represents that component as well, right? And then the third part is this lady here, the checkout clerk, or perhaps the owner of this business, is using the Clover device, and obviously is using some software on it. And when she got into work, she clocked into this device. At the end of the day, the transaction that was just conducted will be associated with the employee, her. So all that software, is also done by Clover or by third-party apps like us. So CSI Works in that case is an ISV, right? So ISV can introduce apps to Clover, and Clover has apps. But what we're talking about here is just the basic apps, right? Like, for example, inventory. Where would you keep your inventory? That's an app that Clover provides. The checkout experience, the transactions, the receipt printing, all of that is offered by Clover. Like I said, even the employee tracking and some discounting capabilities, even a lot of different apps. I believe Clover offers like maybe 50 different apps. So when merchant A bought Clover device, I purposefully used this picture here because this doesn't look like a marketing picture. This looks like a legit picture that I actually had to cut out. But the point is that this is a store that utilizes a Clover device completely as a software, as a payment, and as a hardware. And a lot of that software came out of the box from Clover, right? So Corner Store uses Clover hardware for checkout experience, inventory, employee access, transaction tracking, customer software. So I've touched on all of that. And then the third-party software, an example, would be EBT management, which is introduced as a third-party app. They just go to the app market and they download this app. Okay. The second example that I'm using here is Merchant B, and that's DMV, right? So Department of Motor Vehicles. And DMV utilizes Clover, if I were to go back to this chart, only as a payment and also as a hardware for that payment, right? And DMV has its own, obviously, right? So behind that counter, there is a nice lady who has a computer, and that computer, in our case, would be a point of sale, right? So if we go back to that chart, there is some software that DMV utilizes that was provided by some software vendor out there, and it sits on an additional hardware, right? That's not necessarily Clover. So in the case with DMV, Clover just represents the payment component, okay, nothing else. And if that's the case, if Clover is only being utilized as just a payment component, there's no Clover software, there's no third-party apps. It literally just functions as a payment device. That's it. Okay. And that's the different scenarios of how Clover device can be deployed, right? So right here, like I've just sort of relied on this chart and demonstrated the different charts. Now, the reality of the situation today is that 80% of Clover devices are deployed as a standalone solution, as in for merchant A, because like I said, Clover has a pretty big range of, well, not a pretty big range, but a good range. Let's go back to this picture here. So they have a mini, they have the station, and they have the flex, right? And the combination of these devices with some accessories could be utilized as a standalone solution. And most of the time, that is exactly how it's utilized. It's utilized as a standalone solution 80% of the time. And only 20% of the Clover devices are deployed as an add-on payment device, as an example with the DMV, right? So now let's take a look at PAX. The funny thing with PAX is that while I was searching the internet for a picture of a PAX being utilized as a standalone solution uh, in the wild, I never ended up finding a picture because both of these are marketing pictures. And the reason because PAX is a hardware manufacturer and they handle the payment processing component from the hardware perspective only. So if I were to put PAX on this chart, they can handle hardware and they can handle payments. Okay. But they're open to any payment that's out there. Important to say. And so out-of-the-box POS solution. Some store uses PAX E700 hardware. There's an example of that E700. Base apps for transactions reporting is made by any software provider who has POS software, but no hardware can use PAX with their software. So what I'm trying to say here is that PAX on its own doesn't make any base software. And so that's why it doesn't see that same adoption effect that Clover does, whereas Clover, 80% of Clover, like I've mentioned, in this previous slide here, is deployed as a standalone solution that has everything: software, hardware, payment. PAX heavily relies on ISV, companies like us, to provide the software component because because of that because of that they are entirely open and much easier to work with in terms of what payment processing do you need to stick in there, what software do you need to publish. The approval process for publishing things on PAX is entirely different than approval process for publishing things on Clover, in the sense that because PAX doesn't curate things in the way that Clover does, what you publish only gets validated in the sense of, is this a virus? Is this a hack? Or are you trying to, is this going to break stuff? Just from that perspective, because you very much agents deploy the hardware themselves. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. So the last slide. How do agents offer Clover and PAX today in relation to this slide here? So if an agent needs to displace an entire POS, in other words, if they need to, if they're going into a business and that business has an entire POS solution, right? Or they're approaching a business that doesn't have anything and needs a solution, right? For Clover, they can offer any Clover device. So if I go back here, this little mini can function as a standalone solution that has the software, that has the hardware, and everything. That just little one. Even that flex can be, or a combination of any of that hardware can function as a standalone solution. So that's what we mean, any Clover device. Plus Clover base apps. This is what makes it possible to be standalone, is that Clover offers the base apps, inventory. I'm repeating myself, but and also has an option to offer third-party apps that sit on top of them, but is only locked into Fiserv processing, right? So you cannot do anything else, only Fiserv processing. So if that particular merchant says, yes, you can give me anything you want, but I will never sign up for Fiserv, I don't want Fiserv, then Clover is no longer an option to that merchant from the perspective of an agent. Okay, so same, displace entire POS for complete solution to offer PAX. An agent first needs to find, so first of all, agent can utilize any PAX device, but then agent will need to partner up with someone for base apps, right? So either they can go develop their own, but because mostly we're talking about sales organizations, they don't today. So they'll need to partner up with an ISV. An ISV is an independent sales vendor, which is what we have here. So if we're going on a PAX, for payments, and we're going on a PAX for hardware, then you need somebody out there who does the software. Okay, that's kind of how it works. If an agent is displacing payment processing only, then what they can do is, well, first of all, if they're replacing Fiserv, they can use Clover Mini or Clover Flex. Those two devices can function as actually possibly just the Clover Mini. Yeah, I don't know that Clover Flex can do that. So only Clover Mini. Let's go with that. Can be placed as a payment processing only. And Fiserv is really the only processor that can handle that. Now, if an agent is displacing the payment processing only, and Fiserv is not an option, then they can use any PAX device, or they can even use PAX devices with Fiserv. Okay, so any processing, any PAX device, or Clover Mini only on Fiserv. And then partnership with ISV, where ISV does the software and ISO does the payments. And then Clover Mini, I'm pretty sure that Clover Flex is not an option, so it's going to be like this. And then any PAX device and any processing. So you kind of get the idea. Now, if you go into the wild today and you say, Steve, give me somebody who has a PAX device, most likely 90% probability you're going to have this situation where they have some software they're using. They could have like a computer-based point of sale system, and the only thing that PAX does for them is it sits like this and it handles the payment processing, and it's connected to whatever point of sale they're using. So that would be the scenario. But a PAX is a device that's very well positioned, for which it is very possible to write software, and we have the capability to write some base, like what this is kind of what we're talking about here, right? So we can do some base apps that are required to do some basic checkout experience and handle the ABT situation.